The Instagram Killer: How Eric Lee Used Online Platforms to Prey on Victims. Imagine scrolling through social media only to discover that a serial killer has been using the platform to choose and victimize their prey. This was the terrifying reality for residents of Los Angeles in early 2022, when Eric Lee began using social media to lure and murder innocent victims. In this video, we'll explore the chilling details of the case and the lessons we can learn about the risks of online interactions. Welcome to AF Crime, the channel that brings you fascinating crimes all around the world. If you're interested in this kind of content, then this is the channel for you. Make sure to like this video, click on the subscription button, and turn on the notification bell to keep you updated on our recent uploads. Now, let's get right into the video and investigate the crime scene of Eric Lee, aka the Instagram Killer. Eric Lee was a 27-year-old resident of Los Angeles who had been posing as a successful social media influencer on Instagram. He had amassed a huge following on the platform, using his charm and good looks to attract young women. Lee would post pictures of himself in luxurious settings, driving expensive cars and living a seemingly perfect life. He would then use his popularity to lure young women to meet him in person. Lee had always been interested in social media and had been fascinated by the way influencers were able to amass huge followings. He had tried his hand at becoming an influencer himself, but had failed to gain any traction. Determined to become famous, Lee began to fabricate a lavish lifestyle on Instagram, posting pictures of himself in designer clothes in exotic locations. His online persona soon became popular, and he began to attract a significant following of young women. Lee's first victim was a 22-year-old woman named Samantha Lee, no relation, who was found dead in her apartment in early January of 2022. Her body showed signs of severe trauma, and investigators quickly realized that they were dealing with a serial killer. Over the course of the next few weeks, several more young women were found dead in similar circumstances, all with ties to Lee's Instagram account. The victims of the Instagram Killer were all young women between the ages of 18 and 25. They were all active on social media and had interacted with Lee on Instagram. Lee had used his charm and popularity to gain their trust, and he would convince them to meet him in person. Once he had lured his victims to a private location, he would brutally murder them and dispose of their bodies. The second victim was a 19-year-old Mia Thompson, who had been reported missing by her family. Her body was found a few days later in a deserted alley, and investigators were able to connect her death to Lee's Instagram account. The third victim, a 21-year-old Rachel Adams, whose body was discovered in a dumpster behind a local convenience store. Her phone records showed that she had been in contact with Lee on the day of her disappearance. The fourth and final victim was 18-year-old Lily Chen, who had been reported missing by her friends. Her body was found a week later in a shallow grave in a remote area outside of Los Angeles. The investigation into her death led the police to Eric Lee, who was eventually arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and kidnapping. The investigation into the Instagram Killer was one of the most complex and extensive in the history of the Los Angeles Police Department. Detectives were tasked with tracking down a ruthless serial killer who had managed to evade detection for months, and they knew that time was of the essence. The first step in the investigation was to identify potential suspects. Detectives analyzed the crime scenes and compiled a list of possible perpetrators based on the available evidence. They also reached out to the families and friends of the victims, hoping to gather additional information about their interactions and activities in the days leading up to their deaths. As the investigation progressed, detectives were able to narrow their list of suspects down to a handful of individuals. One name that kept coming up was that of Mark Lee, a 28-year-old man with a history of violent behavior and a troubled past. Lee had been identified as a person of interest early on in the investigation, but detectives had initially been unable to link him definitively to the crimes. To build a stronger case against Lee, detectives began analyzing his digital footprint. They pored over his social media accounts, phone records, and other electronic devices, searching for any evidence that might tie him to the murders. They also conducted surveillance operations, tracking Lee's movements and interactions with potential victims. As the evidence against Lee began to mount, detectives knew that they had to act quickly. They assembled a team of officers and set up a stakeout in a remote area where Lee was known to frequent. It was there that they finally caught him in the act, attempting to lure another victim to her death. Following Lee's arrest, detectives continued to gather evidence against him. They interviewed his friends and family members, hoping to gain further insight into his motivations and behavior. They also conducted forensic analysis of the crime scenes, looking for any additional clues that might tie Lee definitively to the murders. Ultimately, the investigation into the Instagram killer was a triumph of police work and technology. Though a combination of old-fashioned detective work and cutting-edge forensic techniques, detectives were able to bring a dangerous serial killer to justice and put an end to the terror that he had unleashed in the city. The trial of Eric Lee was one of the most closely watched in recent memory. The prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including DNA samples and witness testimony from survivors of Lee's attacks. Lee himself maintained his innocence throughout the trial, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was eventually found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the trial, the families of the victims spoke out about the impact of Lee's crimes had on their lives. They shared heartbreaking stories of loss and grief, and their emotional testimony left a lasting impression on the jury and the public. The trial of Eric Lee also sparked important conversations about the role of social media in modern society. Many people were shocked by the ease with which Lee was able to use Instagram to target and lure his victims. The case raised important questions about the responsibility of social media companies to protect their users from harm and the need for greater regulation of online interaction. The case of the Instagram killer is a haunting reminder of the dangers of online interactions. Lee was able to use his social media presence to lure victims, and many young women were willing to meet him in person without taking basic precautions. This case has several important lessons that we can all learn from. Be cautious of people you meet online. Not everyone on the internet is who they claim to be, and it's crucial to take steps to protect yourself when interacting with strangers online. Verify the identity of the person. Before meeting someone in person, make sure you verify their identity by checking their social media profiles and other online presence. Take basic safety precautions. Always let someone know where you are going and who you are meeting. Avoid meeting someone in private locations, especially if you don't know them well. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Don't be afraid to back out of a meeting or interaction if you feel uncomfortable or unsafe. Be aware of the signs of abuse. If you or someone you know is in a potentially abusive situation, it's important to be aware of the warning signs and seek help as soon as possible. Support the victims. If you know someone who has been a victim of abuse or violence, it's important to offer your support and help them in any way you can. In conclusion, the case of the Instagram killer serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of social media and the importance of staying safe online. Eric Lee's ability to use his social media presence to lure victims, and the fact that many young women are willing to meet him in person without taking basic precautions, highlights the need for greater awareness and education around online safety. The investigation into the Instagram killer was one of the most high-profile cases in recent memory, and it showcased the incredible work of law enforcement officials in tracking down and apprehending a dangerous criminal. The trial of Eric Lee was also a major moment as justice was finally served for the victims and their families. Moving forward, it is crucial that we all take steps to protect ourselves and our loved ones when using social media. By being cautious of people we meet online, verifying their identity, and taking basic safety precautions, we can help prevent tragedies like the Instagram killer case from happening in the future. We hope that this video has been informative and serves as a warning to all viewers to stay vigilant when using social media. Let us all continue to learn from this tragic case and work towards creating a safer and more responsible online community. What do you think? Is social media safe to use? Share your thoughts in the comment section. We hope that you have enjoyed watching this video. If you want more of such video, consider subscribing to AF Crime as we publish multiple crime cases each week. And don't forget to like and share this video. Thanks for watching.